So thank you for coming to this talk. My name is Guilherme. I work as a thread researcher at Cisco Talos. And I'm going to talk today about how we can use metadata in files to track and detect malicious actors. Just a little bit about me. I used to work at McAfee here in Portland for about 12 years. I worked on the detection team. I led the detection team. I worked with the product design, red teaming, EDR, XDR, everything that you can imagine in the AV company. So when I moved to Cisco Talos about a year and a half, I have this detection mentality. I look at something and I see, and I think, how can I detect something? How can I detect this malware? So that's my main focus on Talos. I work on the outreach team, which is the team inside Talos that talk about security, APT groups, and malicious software. And so we are more focused on talking about these threats, right? And my focus inside this group is this kind of malware, like how to detect malicious activity, how the different commodity malware work, and things like that. So this talk is about that. The first thing that I did when I joined the team was I started to look at current state of the malicious activity in the world, right? What are the actors doing to distribute their malware, to infect victims? And at the time, one thing that was very talked about was Microsoft deciding to create some security measures to avoid macro documents from working the way that the malicious actors were using them. Like the auto-open feature, the macros that were running automatically when you open the document, Microsoft decided to put a break on this kind of thing. So they implemented a few changes in the way that Office works in order to prevent these macros from working. One thing that they did was create the mark of the web feature that keeps track of files that came from outside of your machine. So if you try to open a document that came from an email or downloaded from a website, for example, the macros are not executed unless you actively go there and enable the macros. So at that time that I started my research, I noticed that they were changing behavior. Like the malware that I was tracking, mostly commodity malware, they were changing from using macros to using something else. And that something else came as a result of a vulnerability that was disclosed at the time. They discovered, some researchers discovered that if you have some files inside a zip file that was distributed through email or downloaded from the web, the mark of the web don't move to the files that were extracted from this container. So the containers that could be used to distribute these files would prevent the actual malicious files from getting the mark of the web. So the operating system would gladly open them and execute them without any issues. And one thing that they started using at the time was link files. So link files is a very interesting file because it's a file that is very small, so it can be distributed in email or downloaded and very quick to download. And it can allow you to do a lot of things. Link to a file on a remote share, execute commands with parameters, and a lot of different actions on the system. And this was everything that I needed, right? If you have a link file pointed to PowerShell, you can execute a lot of things from that small link file. I started looking at a few groups at the time, specifically Quackbot. Quackbot is it was banking malware that came around 2007, 2008. I started tracking them at McAfee in 2009. So it's kind of my nemesis. I've been tracking Quackbot since forever. And that's the first thing that I looked at. What's Quackbot doing now? And they started working with link files around the end of 2021, 2022. And I started looking at these link files and see how can I detect these link files? What is important there? Other groups that I kept an eye on, Gamma Radon, which was targeting Ukraine at the start of the war. And Bumblebee, IcedID, MoTW, these commodity malwares that were very popular at the time. So when I started looking at link files, I noticed something interesting. Link files, they are a file object that points to another file object on the system. And they have some characteristics that are created by the APIs that Windows use to create shortcuts. They have some metadata on the file that is introduced by the APIs themselves. It's not something that the user actively put there or something that is actively put on the file. The APIs create this information. For example, you have the times that they were created, the shortcut was created, the access and things like that. You have information about the folders where this shortcut is pointing to, and you have information about the machines where this link file was created and where it was moved to. Because when you have a shortcut that moves from one machine to the another, that second machine might not have the same pointers, right? So the shortcut would be invalid. And Windows keep track of this information by changing some fields inside the shortcut when you open on a new machine. So I thought, how can we use this metadata to detect this malware, right? To detect this activity. Because if you look at just the target of the shortcut, you might miss some things. For example, okay, I'm detecting PowerShell inside a link file, but there's a lot of Windows processes or valid software that use PowerShell inside link files. So you cannot just detect PowerShell. You cannot just detect based on parameters, for example, command line parameter that is passed to PowerShell. And if you try to detect on obfuscated code, you'll be hunting these guys forever, because they change one byte, you'll lose the detection. You change another byte. So it's not feasible to keep track of these link files or these malicious files in general by looking at the specific code that is there. So I thought, how can we go back a little bit and the link file itself, how can we detect that? So I found a few interesting information there. One thing is, for example, the drive serial number. Windows, when you create a shortcut, add information about the machine that was used to create that link file. And one of them is the drive serial number of the machine that created that link file. This doesn't change when the link file moves to a different machine. So I have the specific information of what machine, what drive the link file was when it was created. I have user UID of the user that created this. I have the MAC address of the machine, because they use the MAC address to generate, it's a little small there, but on the bottom, there are some droid information. I forgot what droid is, but it's a UUID that is generated when you create the link file, and it contains the MAC address as part of this UUID. So the machine that created the link file, I have even the MAC address that I can match to a specific machine. So keep that in mind. We'll see how this was important later. And when you talk about commodity malware, you're talking about families that generate hundreds, thousands of different samples every day to spawn to new victims, right? You have Quackbot, for example, that downloads a different hash every time that you try to connect to their download site. And you have MoTW that spans millions of samples every day. They are different hashes, so it's not the same hash. And when you're talking about distributing link files, how do you generate these link files? There is no compiler to generate link files, like you have for a binary, for example, that have a source code and then you generate the binary. But the link files have a lot of tools that you can use. So I started fingerprinting these tools and seeing what are the telltales that someone used a builder tool. For example, there is one called MacroPack that also generates link files. There are a few other tools that are available for free that you can use. And when you look at the output of the samples, you can see some characteristics. For example, in some cases, the entire metadata for the link file is wiped out. There is no metadata at all. You just have the argument for the link file that points to some program and nothing else. So this is something that you still can use to detect. Like the lack of metadata that is by default added to a link file when you create it is something interesting to detect, right? So for example, that rule that I created there on VirusTotal basically looks for a link file that had this metadata wiped out. I check a few fields there that are always present when you create a link file. And look for a target that has a JS, BAT, or CMD extension. This was used by Quackbot after the research that I did here. Quackbot started wiping out the metadata in the files because they knew that they could be tracked by this. So we'll see in a bit this. But this is like an example how you can use the metadata or the lack of metadata in a file to detect these things. So this is just an overview of samples that I found on VT that I could map to specific families. And you can see how this activity changes with time. Probably around here, February, March 2022, Microsoft implemented the changes on macros. So macro did not work anymore as the threat actors expected. And you can see a steady increase on the use of link files for malicious purposes. One threat actor that was very active at the time in using link files was Quackbot. You can see here a huge spike around September, October. Because one characteristic of Quackbot is that they have development cycles. So they had a stop here around May, right after the macro stopped working. They stopped for a couple months, and they came back using the link files with ISO as the container. And you can see a huge spike there. But this big purple line here are actually link files that have all the metadata wiped from them. So we cannot use to map to a specific family, but we can see that there is a huge spike around the first in November, December, and then this last couple months now. Because these link files, they are usually the output of the free tools that you can use. So when you have a tool that can generate hundreds, thousands of files in a batch, you have something like that. A lot of different samples with different hashes that appear on VT. And besides the wiped metadata there that is kind of different from the rest, we can see that around this time frame here, we have a crash in the use of link files. So does anyone know what happened at that time? There are two things that happened. One is that Microsoft fixed the bug in Mark of the Web to now keep track of files that were extracted from containers. So ISO, zip files, RAR files, they would now keep the mark of the web for the files that were inside it. So if a file came from the web or the email, and it's extracted from a zip file, it would have this mark of the web. And they also added a lot of rules to detect link files coming from zip files. So this basically killed, at the time, the activity in terms of zip files. The other thing that happened is that around August of that year, someone on Twitter disclosed information that OneNote documents created for OneNote also didn't keep track of the mark of the web. So when Microsoft implemented the changes for ISO and zip, they didn't implement the changes for OneNote, right? So we had something interesting. You have link files not working as intended anymore because of the market of the web, and you have a new file format that don't apply mark of the web. So when you put these two together, you have a new delivery mechanism that is what happened there. And OneNote is interesting because it also have a lot of metadata on the file. All these Office documents, they have a lot of metadata there. They are not as useful as link files, but they still can be used to correlate with specific fields or specific file types, and then used for detection. They are less useful for tracking, but more useful for detection. And this is what happened. These are, again, samples from VirusTotal that are considered malicious. I put here a limit on at least 10 detections for the samples in VirusTotal to make sure that they were really malicious, because there's a lot of OneNote files that end up in VT. But we can see that around January, February, March, we have a huge spike in the usage of OneNote as a delivery mechanism for malware. And a huge crash after that because Microsoft decided to fix the issue for OneNote too. They already did for zip and ISO files before. When they did for OneNote, you see that the threat actors stopped using it because it was not worth their time anymore. They were not getting the results that they expected from this. And this is one thing that was very clear with this research is they react very fast to changes in the threat landscape. When there is a new patch, when there is a new vulnerability disclosed, they don't take long to start using it or stopping using it, discarding the method and go for something easier. We saw that in the link information that they went back to link files as a delivery mechanism, but wiping out all the metadata to make it more difficult to detect. Because when you create a detection, you need to make sure that you're detecting malicious files, right? And if the file don't have much information there, it's very difficult to make a difference between a malicious file and just any file that is on the system. So even though we still have the mark of the web problem, they are still able to use this kind of delivery mechanism, but make it more difficult for detection. So, for example, here is one. It's very small. I didn't think it was going to be so small. An example of metadata there. One thing that I highlighted here is this is an example of OneNote that was used by Quackbot. We have a lot of information about the page itself, one page count, one image count, one payload count. The content of the page is just 2 enters. And the image metadata, so the image that is shown on the page when you open it, the name is in Russian. And it basically say unnamed drawing. But when you put these things together, you have a Russian file name with a document that don't have any text content and just one page. And you put all these characteristics together, you can say with like high confidence that this is something suspicious, right? There might be someone that created a one-page document that will probably be detected if you create a detection for this. But the chance of detecting something malicious when you put all of these characteristics together is high. So it's a good detection technique when you look at these fields in the metadata and make these correlations. So let's see now how I use this information that I show you guys to track some of these threat actors. The first is Gamma-Radon. Gamma-Radon is a Russian-based group that usually target victims around the globe, but they mostly focus on the Eastern Europe victims. And by the time that the Russian invasion happened, they started targeting victims in Ukraine. So we at Cisco, we did a lot of work in trying to help Ukraine in the cyberspace. And we tried to look at Gamma Radon and see how we could prevent these attacks from them, right? So one thing that Gamma Radon did at the time was they had phishing or mousespan emails with a document attached to these emails, a Word document. And inside the Word document, they had a link file. So as a OLE object inside the document, when you click that link file inside the document, it would open and execute the PowerShell scripts that were the characteristics of Gamma Radon at the time. So I took these link files from the documents, and I started looking at the metadata to see how to detect these things, right? And one thing that I noticed when I looked at specifically the drive serial number for the link files that we've seen coming from Gamma Radon is that they always have the same exact drive serial number, one single serial number for all the link files that were used in Gamma Radon attacks. It doesn't matter where it came from. All the link files that were used to attack Ukraine came from that single machine. And when I looked historically at this drive serial number, by looking at VT, looking at old reports on Gamma Radon that had link files as a delivery mechanism, I noticed that all of these also had the same serial number. And I could go back to reports from 2017 on Gamma Radon that had link files as a delivery mechanism that had the exact same one. Another thing that I found is that, for example, there was a company in 2022 that released a report on a new actor targeting Ukraine called GlowSend. I looked at their samples, same exact serial number. So I knew that it was Gamma Radon. They were calling by another name, but it was Gamma Radon because there was one single machine that created all these link files. And one thing that was interesting in terms of Gamma Radon is that they started using at some point link files that had some like weird sizes. Like the link file is usually small, right? 2K, 1K. And these files were like in the megabytes. So 1 megabyte, 800K, something like that, which is very big for a link file. So I looked at the file and I noticed that there was a full digital certificate at the end, like a code signing certificate from a PE file. And I was like, okay, but why? Like, there is no provision in the link file format for digitally signing a shortcut. There is no such thing as digitally signing a shortcut. So I looked at the files, and I noticed that if you take the same file and you put the digital signature on the file and you send to VT, the detections would drop drastically. Sometimes even no detection at all on the samples because of the digital certificate on the file. Not just because it's garbage, but because I guess, I won't say that I've seen this before, but I guess that the AVs check the certificate on the file without checking the file type. And, okay, this is Microsoft, I will not detect that. And just pass the file as clean without actually looking at the file type, at the contents, and see if is there really a reason to have a digital certificate here. So this is something that they were using there. I found this because I had the rules to detect the drive serial number. And when I look at the files, I say, hey, my rule is probably falsing because I have a lot of files here that have 0 detections. And when I look at the files, they were really Gamma Radon, but with the digital certificates. And there were some interesting correlations too that I could do. Besides tracking historically the activities of a group, there are some correlations that I could do based on this data. I started to create a database of metadata for link files. And just a side note, I hate Kibana, but I use Kibana to store this information and start to try to find correlation between these samples. And I found something interesting. Machines that were used to distribute Quackbot were also used not distribute, sorry. I'll get there. Machines that were used to create link files that were distributing Quackbot were also used to create link files that were distributing Bumblebee and ICED. The same serial numbers were being used to create link files that go to one malware or to the other. Or what that means is that the threat actors that were distributing Quackbot were probably creating payloads to distribute this other malware too. And this correlation between ICED, Quackbot, and Bumblebee was disclosed by the time that there was this leak of the Conti chat logs, the Conti group, which was a ransomware group at the time. And they had their chat logs leaked by some disgruntled member. And in the chat logs, there was discussions about the developers behind Quackbot also being part of the management groups that were taking care of Bumblebee and ICED. So I could confirm by the metadata in the link files that this was true. Like there was Quackbot developers or Quackbot distributors that were creating payloads for these different families based on the link metadata that was being used at the time to distribute these families. So yeah, sorry, the images were too small there on the corner, but this is just an example of the different serial numbers and the payloads that were triggered at the time. And there was one interesting case here. You guys will not be able to see, but this user here, the parsing path field in the link file contains the path where the link file was created, right? Or where the link file was pointing to. And it says here, C users Lamar. And it was interesting because I see a link file in VT that had this C users Lamar, and it was pointing to a random file. It was anything malicious. But it had the same serial number as Quackbot. And I thought, okay, this is weird. This might be another false positive on my rule. Let's keep an eye on this. 2 days later, the same user sent a bunch of files, or the same, it's not the guy itself who sent, but someone sent a bunch of files that had the same path using the same serial number, but this time dropping ICED. So the guy that created the link files is probably this Lamar user, or has a machine where this user is the user that they have there. I don't know if it's his real name, but that user created the link files on the same machine that was used to create Quackbot before, and was distributing ICED. I found the same thing for Bumblebee, like the same machine, a different machine from the one that I showed there on top, was being used to distribute Quackbot and Bumblebee. And the interesting part about the drive serial number is that you can match to a specific machine, so you know where this came from. And when you look at the Quackbot, specifically the Quackbot samples, you can find information about what botnet this is part of. Quackbot has two main botnets, or had two main botnets before the FBI took down their infrastructure, which was the president's. The latest one was Obama. And the letters. The latest one was BB, but before that it was AA and TR. So these are the two main botnets that Quackbot had at the time. And I could match specific serial numbers to a specific botnet. So I knew that this sample came from the Obama just based on the drive serial number. And this is important here because I knew that the Obama botnet was the one distributing Bumblebee at the time. So I know that this guy from the Obama botnet is the same guy that is distributing Bumblebee. Probably they have some connections there. And I could track things like changes in the behavior of the the botnet itself, like the delivery method that they were using, the changes in the code that Quackbot had in the last 2 years. I could see that the Obama was usually the first one to implement a change, followed a few weeks later by the Letters botnet. So they were exchanging information, they were like talking to each other and discussing what was the best method to deliver information. For example, Obama started to wipe the metadata from their link files around September. And then a few weeks later, the Letters botnet, they start doing the same. So this is the kind of thing that I could find with this research. And then we had this huge gap in link file metadata. Oh yeah, sorry, here I was getting ahead of myself. Here is an example of the data that I have. You can see here the serial numbers. These are just a couple examples. I have more for the same botnets related to Obama, and then there are the ones related to AA and BB, which was basically the same groups. And I could figure out that they were the same group because the same serial number that was distributing AA later started to distribute BB. So I could keep track of the actor through the change from AA to BB by the serial number on the machines that we were using to generate these link files. And we can see that the Obama is the most prolific one in generating these link files, followed by AA and some others that were there. Because there were like 5 or 6 machines for each group that I used to generate these files. And I had this information on the serial numbers. The thing that I was saying is that after that point where OneNote stopped being a thing and link files basically they all came without any metadata, so I couldn't keep track of who is who in terms of the malware families that are connected to this. I had my rules on VT, and one day I found one hit on the Quackbot rule. And I say, oh, that's weird. Like, why one hit now after 6-7 months without any hit? And when I looked at the sample, it was connected to a different sample. The sample itself had basically a PowerShell script that was downloading an exe file via WebDAV on port 80, which is not common, right? You can see here, or maybe you can see or not, Explorer connecting to an IP address, and then they kill Explorer, and then they open the file from that same share. So basically, they are trying to connect to a network share just to have Windows authenticate or do whatever hash communication with the network share, and then they try to download this. This has 2 important things here. One is that they are using this through port 80. WebDAV is basically a web request. It's a get on or head on a specific file on a web request. So this is very difficult to differentiate from a real web connection, right? And the second thing is that when you do that, Windows probably try to authenticate to the remote WebDAV folder. And by authenticating there, it sends your NTLM hash. So they can collect this information. And it downloads the file, right? So the file was downloaded, and when I look at the file, the link file, you can see, has the same serial number as we just showed on the other slide. And when I look at the file, this was actually ransomware, Ransom Knight. It's a variant of Cyclops. And they were distributing this Ransom Knight to the victims. Quackbot worked with other groups in the past, but they usually don't get involved in ransomware. So I was wondering, well, why is that, right? Why are they working with a ransomware malware instead of their malware now? That was the time that the FBI informed everybody that they had took down the Quackbot infrastructure. They started this campaign around August 4, and I think that August 20-something, 7, the FBI announced that they had took down the Quackbot infrastructure, took down all the C2 servers, and cleaned up all the Quackbot machines, the Quackbot infected machines, by using a feature, a feature from the malware to download a binary that would do the cleanup on the victim machines, right? So this campaign from QuackBot started before the FBI took down the infrastructure, and was still running around the time that they took down this infrastructure. So the guys behind QuackBot, or the threat actors that created these link files, also created the same link files for QuackBot in the past, and they were running a campaign with a ransomware at the same time that the FBI was taking down the other part of the infrastructure, right? And I thought, okay, so what happened? When I looked at the FBI report, they took down the C2 infrastructure for QuackBot. But all the distribution network that these guys have available, it's still there. And they were not arrested, they are still there, right? So they could run this campaign without any impact from the FBI takedown. But yeah, of course, they had a financial impact, right, with the FBI takedown. The FBI arrested their crypto resources, the crypto coins. They took down the server infrastructure, which is pretty complex for QuackBot. So it has a financial impact for these guys. And I think that they are running these campaigns. They started with ransom. Along with the ransomware, along with the link file on the same phishing or same mouse spam campaign, they had Remco's backdoor, so they could take control of the machine. And now they are running Darkgate and Picabot, which is another bot. So there was some discussion. I just published a blog yesterday with more details on this entire campaign. And there was some discussion of whether it's the same actor or not. Maybe the distribution network that is being used to distribute this malware is not the same as QuackBot used in the past, but I know for sure that the link files that they are using were created on the same machines that were used to create QuackBot in the past. Like, I went back 2-3 years, as long as VT and our Cisco database can give me, and there was never any other malware besides this that I mentioned distributed by the same machine. So it's not something that is widespread, or any thread group use the same machine to do that. That's not the case. That there's only one actor behind this machine that is now generating these link files to distribute this campaign, this new campaign, with Darkgate, Picabot, and RansomNight. So it was pretty interesting to see. First, because I could find this new campaign based on the link metadata that I had worked before. And the second is that these guys were the same guys that started wiping out metadata from their files because they knew that they could be tracked by that. So what happened now? Did they mess up and forgot about the link metadata because a lot of time has passed, right, since the last? Or did they get stressed because of the FBI takedown? I don't know. But they messed up and they left this information on the link files, which enabled me to track them and connect this new campaign with the previous actors that distributed QuackBot. So yeah, that's the details that I was talking about. The campaign is basically the same modus operandi that QuackBot had in the past. They have an HTML file that uses HTML smuggling to drop a zip file on the machine. This zip file has XLL. It's an Excel add-on extension, which is basically a DLL. And this DLL is the Remco's binary, and a link file on the same zip. This link file points to a WebDAV resource that downloads the other malware that I mentioned. Besides RansomNight and Darkgate, they are also downloading Redline and MetaStealer, which are two information stealers. So my theory is that QuackBot, or the guys behind this campaign, they are trying to rebuild their victim network. They are trying to collect information from victims. They are trying to rebuild the network of infected machines where they have control via the dark gate or Remco's backdoor, so they could trigger the next Quackbot wave. Because we know that it's coming, right? I know, I loved what the FBI did. I know that it's important to have this kind of actions because you have a huge impact financially on these guys, but we know that they're coming back at some point because the guys are still there and they have the source code and they can restart everything. So takeaways. The metadata in malicious files, not only link files, but any kind of document or even PE file sometimes, is important. They have a lot of information that is not under direct control of the person that creates the file. Sometimes Windows had this information, sometimes the application that they're using had this information. And you can use this information to track and to detect malicious activity, right? Don't look just at the malicious code. Sometimes the container for this code is important too because it might have a lot of information on the threat actors that are behind it. The threat actors have lousy OPSEC as everybody else. They forget things. They don't look at the files that they create sometimes. They might have like a username or a password or information on their machines, IP addresses, everything that could be present there without their knowledge. And if you look at this information, you can find out more about that threat actor. And when you, especially for the people that work with detection engineering, if you look at this metadata and you create a database or a way to track this metadata for files, you have a very good resource for detection. Think about if you need to create a YARA rule or if you need to create something that will map the attributes of a specific file type and keep a track of what is malicious and what is not, and you have something to use for detection too. Even machine learning, YARA rules or whatever, you have something that is very good for detection and is usually, people usually forget about it. Even in the detection scene, people forget that these things are there and they are very important. Right? And like I said, yeah, keep track of this information because at some point you might see something that you've seen in the past that was malicious or that targeted you, and you will be able to detect this even before something malicious happens on the machine, right? And I think I'm good. I don't even know how long I took on this. So if you guys have any questions or anything.
Is any of this we have is available publicly, this information and GitHub, or is it fairly proprietary to?
No, like I said, I published a blog yesterday on the Quackbot campaign. It has a link to another blog that I wrote on the link metadata research, which is also available on the Talos blog. So talosintelligence.com should be the link for the blog. This information is there. I don't know if I'll be able to share these specific slides, but all the information that is here is on these two blogs that are available there. And we have all the IOCs and everything documented on the blogs.
How would you take the link file metadata and use it for detection like at scale across an entire enterprise?
Well, like I said, I worked for an AV company, so in the case of an AV, detection for a link file is very easy because they usually are small files with a fixed structure. So detecting something in a link file is very easy. Like it's quick, it's something that it will not take a huge performance impact. Same for YARA, for example. So if you have a good talk with your AV company, you can ask them to create something like that, or any other way. Usually, you need the capacity to look inside the files, and you need some knowledge of the file format. So that will limit how you can detect this, right? Sometimes the product don't have the ability to look inside the content of the file. Like, I don't know if it's still like that, but some ADRs, they cannot look inside the content of the file. It might be difficult to detect this. But that's what you need. Like, it's simple. It's not something that will impact too much.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you know of any examples of non-malicious link files with deleted metadata? I'm curious what the false positive rate about.
Yes, there are some false positives. That rule that I showed for the Quackbot detection, it's actually something that generates some falses because there are applications that create link files too, right? They might use for any reason, but when these applications create link files, if they don't use the APIs as expected, the file will be clear of metadata, or sometimes don't have all the metadata that needs to be present there. And if they use a template, for example, to create the link files, which is also very common for the link creation tools, like MacroPack and things like that. So there are situations where the metadata will be wiped out, and we need to be very careful there in this case.
Given that antiviruses are starting to incorporate this into their detection signatures, how long do you think it'll take Quackbot and other groups to respond and come up with something new?
It usually don't take long. Like in terms of the delivery mechanism, they are very quick in changing this, depending on the threat landscape. The malware itself takes more time to develop, and so they have this cycle of 4 months, 6 months run, and then 2 months holidays or development cycle. But in terms of delivery mechanisms, they change like in a few days. Like, just a few days and it's gone.
You mentioned several times that you were able to track them to the specific person via their serial number. If they got smart enough to spoof that and push machines, do you have a way to track them after that? Is there other information you have?
Yes, that's a problem. It's possible to spoof, of course, because you can always spoof the content of these files. I haven't seen examples of this, or at least I haven't detected in the samples that I analyzed, I haven't detected any attempt to spoof this information. But it's possible. It's possible that someone will look at this research and say, okay, I'm going to use this now, and everybody will be Quackbot from now on. There is not really an easy way to detect this, the same way that there is not an easy way to detect any other spoofed information on other file types or other parts of the infection chain, right? And there is one interesting anecdote story. Sorry, I'm Brazilian, so sometimes I get stuck with English, but there is an interesting story with this research is that I was looking at the gamma radon samples, and I started collecting a lot of samples related to gamma radon from VirusTotal. And I got a lot of link files. They were always associated with the document that they used to phish, and the binaries that were downloaded later. So, okay, this link file is part of the infection chain. I started downloading all of them, create a rule to detect these files on VirusTotal, and got like millions of hits. Like, oh my God, what the hell happened here? So when I look at the files, I noticed that they were always pointing to a document. Like the link files were pointing to a document. They were not pointing to a command or anything like that. Always pointing to a document. And I noticed that when VT replicated the documents from gamma radon on their machines, they usually are very good at wiping out any metadata from their systems, but not from link files. So the link files that was collecting was the link file that is created by Office when Office opens the document and create like a recent documents, right? And that link file had all the information about the VT machines. So I could map basically their entire sandbox infrastructure or whatever machines they use for sandboxing there based on the link files that were created for documents. So yeah, there is this problem too. If the link file is created dynamically by the malware, for example, the old filing factors, USB filing factors, when the filing factor runs on your machine, and you put a pen drive, it creates a link file on this pen drive pointing to the malware. That link file will have the information from your machine, not the attacker machine, because they don't use a template. They basically just create a shortcut using the Windows APIs, right? So it needs to be very careful. You need to be very careful with how this file was created, right? How this file came to the machine. Does it come as a link file, or is it created on the machine? Right? So yeah, you have to be careful in this sense too. Not just the spoofing, but you have to be careful with the files that are dynamically created on the machine. All right, thank you everybody. And